This is a 2002 Ford F-150 Harley-Davidson edition, and it's cool. It's got a big supercharged V8, flames down the side, and chrome everything. It may not exactly be to everyone's taste, but back in the early 2000s, this was the truck you wanted. And today, I'm going to review it and show you all of its quirks and features. Before I get started, big news! This F-150 Harley-Davidson edition is currently for sale, and it's being auctioned live on Cars and Bids. This is a fantastic truck, and it's the one you want with the supercharged V8, most of them weren't, and incredibly low miles, under 13,000, and it's in fantastic condition. And you can buy it on Cars and Bids. So, once you finish watching this video, click the link in the description below to visit the live auction for this Harley F-150, where you can bid on it and buy it only on Cars and Bids. Alright, time for the quirks and features of the Harley-Davidson F-150. And the biggest deal about this truck wasn't the Harley-Davidson stuff, which I will of course cover in great detail shortly. Instead, the biggest deal was the engine. So, the Harley F-150 made its debut for the 2000 model year, and the original truck used a 5.4-liter Triton V8 that made 260 horsepower. That was a pretty healthy figure because the regular F-150 with that engine had about 235 horsepower, so it was a nice power boost in 2001. But the big news came in 2002 when Ford put a supercharger in the Harley F-150, and they basically gave it the same engine as the high-performance F-150 SVT Lightning. The Lightning had 380 horsepower from this engine. The Harley had 340. Not as much, but still a big number. Now, the difference was largely due to pulley size. The Harley trucks have a larger supercharger pulley, so you can run less boost, and the Harley trucks had a smaller opening in front, which allowed for less airflow, which also limited the power a bit, and all the Harley-Davidson F-150s were four-door Super Crew trucks, as I'll mention, whereas the Lightnings were two-door flare side, the smallest F-150 available. So, the Lightning was faster, but the Harley F-150 was still fast. A big, rumbly, supercharged V8. And it's especially a big deal because Ford only supercharged the Harley F-150 in 02 and 03. For 04, the F-150 was redesigned, and the Harley-Davidson edition switched to the Super Duty body style, where it became more of an appearance package and less about performance modifications. And the Harley F-Series remained a Super Duty truck for many years after that, before briefly switching back to the F-150 in 2011, but again, it was still just an appearance package. No more supercharged V8 like this Harley F-150. By 2013, the Harley F-150 was gone entirely. And although it has come back in recent years, it's now done by an aftermarket supplier called Tuscany, who really just modifies F-Series trucks and then sells them as new vehicles, but still not from the factory, through dealerships. So when you look back on the Harley Ford trucks, you see a lot of Super Duties, a lot of cosmetic appearance stuff. This was the Harley truck to have for only 2 years with that supercharged V8, 340 horsepower, and 425 pound-feet of torque. This was the coolest truck on the road. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here because I should mention exactly how this went down. How Ford took an F-150 and turned it in to a Harley F-150. So, Ford and Harley-Davidson created a partnership in the late 90s where Ford would make a truck with Harley-Davidson branding and a lot of other cosmetic and, of course, performance touches to set it apart from a regular F-150. It would be a special edition Harley-Davidson motorcycle truck. And the result was a surprisingly comprehensive upgrade over a standard F-150. To do this truck, Ford started with a rear-wheel drive Super Crew model, meaning 4 full-size doors and a short bed. That was the basis for all of these Harley F-150s. And from there, the customization began. Ford lowered the truck by 1 inch to give it a lower center of gravity and a sportier feel, and they chromed a lot of stuff on the outside to match the Harley-Davidson persona. The front grille, as you can see, is all chrome, not on a regular F-150, but on the Harley. The wheels were also chromed. 20-inch chrome wheels went onto every Harley F-150, and chrome side steps, as you can see, to help match the rest of the stuff. This truck also had a dual side exit exhaust, as you can see, of course with chrome exhaust tips, because what else would you do? And this truck still rumbles. Take a listen to that exhaust. But the Harley-ifying an F-150 went beyond just some chrome stuff on the outside. There was much more, starting with the orange pinstripe down the side. And Harley orange, of course, a dual pinstripe that turns into flames when you get to the truck's bed. A pinstripe and flames to really drive home the Harley-Davidson point. You also had in the wheel center caps the Harley-Davidson logo instead of the Ford oval. The Harley logo appears there instead on the chrome. And on the front fender, you had Harley-Davidson badging right next to the standard F-150 badging to remind everyone that this was the two paired together. Now, one important thing you can see here, it says F-150 Supercharged, which is of course an easy way to tell apart the 02 and 03 Harley trucks that were supercharged from the earlier models that weren't. That little subtle indication in the badge. And of course, beyond that badge, you had a similar one on the tailgate that also shows the Harley logo and says F-150 and Supercharged. Again, a reminder that this was an extra special F-150. And then you went into the bed where there was more Harley-Davidson. Right up against the back of the truck, you have this full color Harley logo, which is suspiciously mounted in an oval-shaped area. I suspect the standard F-150 just had the Ford oval logo there, and for this truck they replaced it with a Harley logo inside an oval because, well, let's be honest, it was cheap. Now, on the rubber bed liner, you can also see the Harley-Davidson logo, massive this time, and again, reminding you exactly what this truck is. And you'll also notice another item in the bed, a little metal gate, which might surprise you. That is a bed extender. The way it worked was you drop the tailgate, like normal in a pickup truck, and then you would fold out the bed extender, which would give you more enclosed space if you needed it. The thinking on the Harley truck was, with the bed extender, you could actually fit your motorcycle inside the truck and carry your Harley in your Harley F-150. It just seemed fitting. And if all those Harley logos weren't enough, you also had one on the key. The Ford logo on one side, flip it over, the Harley-Davidson logo on the other, just so you could flex on other F-150 owners even when you weren't near your truck. Yeah, my key says Harley-Davidson. And next up we move inside the Harley F-150, where you get, well, more Harley stuff, as you might expect. The seats are two-tone dark gray and light gray seat centers, which obviously was different from the standard F-150, but a bigger difference is the Harley logo literally placed onto the seat back. It's not printed into the leather, it's not embroidered or stitched. The Harley logo is literally digging into your back while you while you drive along in this truck. And on the center console lid, the armrest, you can see flames reminiscent of the ones down the side of the truck. And at the top, the Harley-Davidson logo once again printed here, just to remind you what you're driving. Also in the center, you have a special plaque, as you can see, that gives the model year, the VIN, the production number, and of course the Harley and F-150 logos in that Supercharged badge below. And we're not done yet. You also got special gauges that have a silver backing, looks like billet, like a part you might find under the hood, and it says Supercharged over on the tachometer, just to remind you that this truck is extra special. Another interesting touch inside the Harley F-150s, they added some chrome in the interior, but to some rather unusual items, like the stalk for the gear selector coming off the steering column. They chromed that. It wasn't chromed in the regular trucks. The seat adjustments, which you can't even actually see when you're driving, but you can feel them. You're feeling that chrome. They chromed those. Same with the interior door handle. That's chromed. Probably the strangest one, though, is the end of the turn signal stalk. Chrome has been added to that where it wasn't on standard F-150 models. Just some weird chrome details in here. Maybe a more traditional one is the pedals, which you can see have this kind of aluminum look, gives them a sportier feel, and adds to the Harley atmosphere, as does the owner's manual pouch, which you can see leather, and it has the Harley-Davidson logo printed right there on the front. Not just a standard F-150 owner's manual pouch. No, we need better in the Harley truck. And next up, we move on to the back of the Harley truck, where we discover two seats. I think a lot of people don't know, but this is how these came. Two seats and a center console up front, and two seats and a center console in back. You couldn't get a three-person rear bench seat in the Harley truck. It was just a four-seater. And you have a lot of the same Harley touches back here as you had up front, like those two-tone dark gray, light gray seats with the Harley-Davidson emblem placed right there on your seat back, so all your friends knew you had a Harley truck because you got out and it was imprinted into your t-shirt. You also have the center console back here with the flames on it, just like you did up front, and the Harley logo, as you can see on the front part of that center console armrest lid. Now you might be thinking, did they make a center console in the back just for the Harley F-150? And the answer is no. This truck shared this center console with another very special Super Crew F-150 based vehicle from this era, the Lincoln Blackwood. That was also a four-seater, two in the front, two in the back. It also had this center console, obviously not with the flames, but Lincoln's horrible failure of a pickup truck shared this center console, and obviously that allowed them to spread out the costs, and they stuck it in the Harley F-150 as well. Now, you might be wondering, why exactly was this truck a four-door, four-seater Super Crew model? The Harley version should be a performance truck, a sport truck. But remember, like I said earlier, Ford had the SVT Lightning at the time, which was the short, small Ford performance truck, and I suspect they didn't want them to overlap, especially considering they shared a powertrain. So Ford figured, well, we'll make the Harley truck a more practical four-door, and that'll create some space between the two performance trucks. At least that's my theory, but it seems plausible. But anyway, next up, beyond all of the Harley touches in this truck and beyond the powertrain, there were some other interesting quirks and features of this F-150 that are worth mentioning, the quirkiest of which is the voice recorder that's mounted on the driver's sun visor. You see a few buttons there, record, play, some other buttons on the side. This is a voice recorder. You could create memos to yourself and, well, take a listen to me doing it.
Hello, Kenan, it's Doug. The E55 AMG is better than the M5. Ha 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 ha. Hello, Kenan, it's Doug. The E55 AMG is better than the M5. Ha 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 ha.
Next up, an interesting quirk on the outside, the exterior rear view mirrors incorporated turn signals. This little panel on the front half of the mirror stuck out a little further than the mirror itself, and it had this little red piece that would flash as a turn signal. As you can see, this was kind of the infancy of side-mounted marker lights, which has always been a government mandate in Europe. It wasn't mandated for this truck, but they added it. It was a cool little touch. Also on the outside, a cool touch in this truck, the keypad to get inside. You would buy the truck and it would come with a little code that you could use to open the door even if you didn't have your key. The thinking was you were going on a jog or playing basketball with your Harley friends. You could leave the keys in the truck so you didn't have to take them with you. And then you walk up to the truck, enter your code, climb in, the keys are where you hit them in the glove box, whatever, and then you can drive off. It's actually a pretty cool feature, and Ford still uses this keypad to this day. Here's another quirky Ford touch from this era. The cruise control buttons are mounted on the steering wheels, you can see, and they're covered in like dots and lines. The thinking was you'd put different surfaces on each button, and that way you could turn on the cruise control without having to look down. You would remember that the resume button was the one with lines and the coast button was the one with dots, and so you could just kind of feel the button and then press it and it would do what you wanted. Of course, nobody committed these things to memory. It was a ridiculous idea, but that was the thought, to help keep you from being distracted. And by the way, speaking of the steering wheel, shout out to Ford for using the crappiest steering wheel possible in this special truck. It was just this single two-spoke across the center wheel, didn't have any special branding, didn't say Harley. They didn't want to go that far, sticking a Harley logo in the steering wheel. That was too much for Ford. The Harley leather owner's manual cover they could do, but the steering wheel is the same one out of a base model F-150 XL with a bench seat and no radio. And that was that. By the way, here's another interesting piece of Ford cost cutting. On the ceiling above the rear view mirror, you have a compass, which shows you, of course, what direction you're traveling. And then next to that compass, there's a button marked Select. You could press that button and get a wide range of information, except in this truck, you press it and it just turns off the compass. It's supposed to show you like the temperature, maybe your fuel range, but I guess this truck didn't include that option. So you have the compass or you have the compass off. And that's all you can do with the Select button. Now, with that said, one nice touch that this truck had was power-operated pedals. This little switch to the left of the steering wheel would adjust the pedals forward or backwards, obviously to improve your comfort and your driving position. That was a pretty cutting-edge feature for 2002 with this truck. Obviously, a lot of vehicles, especially pickup trucks, have it now, but back in the day, that was a nice luxury. And speaking of nice luxuries, here's the window sticker for this truck. Came in at a fairly reasonable $37,595 when it was new back in 2002, and that included a few important options like a 6-disc CD changer, which you could find inside the front center console. Open up the flames, and there's your CD changer, so you could actually change the CDs when you were on the go, like sitting at a stoplight. You could take some out, put some in. A lot better than the trunk-mounted CD changers a lot of other cars from this era. And just in case you were wondering, back here, the rear center console is just an absolutely massive storage area. It's totally huge. You could put a lot of stuff in it if that's something you wanted to do. Different panels and pockets where you can stick all sorts of stuff. And there's even more storage in the back. You fold the seat forward and there's this carpeted panel. You can undo the cap holding it in place and get even more storage access back here. These little storage compartments are behind both of the rear seats. So there was a lot of cargo space in the back of this truck. Also worth pointing out, the rear seats had their own audio controls because you could stick in headphones into these headphone jacks, as you can see, and then adjust the song, the track, the volume, that sort of thing. Rear seat audio. That passed for rear seat entertainment back in 2002. In the days before built-in DVD players and iPads, you had headphone jacks and a volume dial. By the way, also worth pointing out back here, you do have a cigarette lighter style charge port, which is nice to have, especially in the days before device charging was common. You didn't usually get that, but you got it in the Harley F-150, and probably a lot of other F-150s as well. Also in this vicinity, this panel lifts down, and those are your cup holders back here. And so, some nice practicality in back. You could plug in your headphones, listen to music, charge your devices, have your drink, and also store a lot of stuff in your flame-covered center console. All right, driving the Harley F-150. This is a seriously impressive version of this truck. The Harley F-150s, you know, some people bought them and drove them. They thought they were cool and just used them, but some people kind of thought they'd end up as collector's items. And the people who did that with the 02 and the 03 models and kept them really nice, they are especially being rewarded. These trucks are worth more than you'd think, because those were the supercharged ones, and that was the era where they were like really, really the more special than just the appearance packages that came later. Now, I make fun of some of the Harley-Davidson branding and badging in this truck, but the truth is that even if you strip away all the Harley stuff, this truck was pretty damn cool, in the sense that it had the Lightning powertrain with only 40 less horsepower, and I'm sure you could throw a smaller pulley on there and a couple little things, and you could probably get it right up to the Lightning's horsepower or far more if you really wanted to. And unlike the Lightning, you got a four-door truck here, so a little bit more practicality. And frankly, I always thought the Super Cruise were a little better looking, which is sacrilege to say about the Lightning, but it's how I feel. So on that subject of, you know, the power that this truck has, well, this truck is pretty powerful. Everybody was saying the non-supercharged ones were doing 0 to 60 in like the mid-7-second range, which isn't all that much, but then the supercharger added almost 100 more horsepower. And that got things going a little bit. Think maybe like low to mid-6-second range for 0 to 60 with the supercharger, and that's a pretty impressive number for a truck from 2002. Keep in mind, you know, the Ram SRT10 hadn't existed yet. Yes, GMC had done the Cyclone years earlier, but it was long gone, and supercharger wine. And performance trucks weren't really a thing. And then this shows up and it's like, really? That much power in a truck? And it's got all this Harley stuff? Yeah! And a lot of people felt that way. Oh. And indeed, I actually think this is a pretty cool truck when you think about it with that lens. It's fast, relatively fast. It has a nice rumble to it, responsive powertrain. Even on the freeway here, you put your foot down and transmission takes a second for it to do its thing, but it does its thing and we get going. You get good supercharger whine, good sound. Now, the handling experience isn't so great. There's a lot of steering play, let's just say. There's still a lot of body roll. Obviously, steering precision is far better than a regular F-150, and so is handling. You had sport suspension, you had lowered suspension, there was some benefits, but you know, this truck, even in its period, probably didn't handle that well, and by modern standards, looking back 20 plus years later, it definitely didn't handle that well. But that wasn't really the point of this. I mean, the point was you had this cool truck, all these chrome things, big power, and it was legitimately a truck. I wouldn't buy this thing now based on the driving experience, because it, like all old cars, even old sports cars, they start to get old, they start to feel worn, they start to feel floaty. It's not quite the same experience. But for this truck, you still have the nostalgia feel of the powertrain of a big V8 with audible supercharger whine, of all these chrome touches. I will say though also the interior, man, Ford just was not really giving it their all back in this day. The materials, it's just plastic, plastic, plastic everywhere. This was the Harley F-150 to have. It really was. It had the power, it had the supercharger, it was only a couple of model years. Like, this is the cool one. The rest had varying degrees of cool, but didn't quite reach the basically four-door Lightning that this truck was. Just don't judge it by the standards of a modern vehicle in terms of tech, in terms of materials quality, in terms of handling, even ride quality. I mean, it's nice and comfortable, especially for a vehicle from its era, but it's like relatively rough driving this thing. Like, you hear a lot, you feel a lot, there's a lot of road noise. This is how trucks especially were in the early 2000s. But it's still cool, and it's fun, and it definitely has like a piece of people's minds who lived through this era. Everyone remembers seeing these Harley trucks on the road, and everyone remembers when this partnership happened and the Harley F-150 was on sale. And there's something to that. And so that's the 2002 Ford F-150 Harley-Davidson edition. It's been more than 20 years, but this truck still rumbles. And it's been cool to check out one of the hottest trucks on the market from 2 decades ago. Anyway, now it's time to give the Harley F-150 a DougScore. And the DougScore is here, 43 out of 100, a respectable showing against rivals like the Dodge Ram SRT10 and Hummer H1 Alpha, among others. Truthfully, the Harley F-150 was kind of a gimmicky cosmetic package, except for the 2002 and 2003 models, which had real power to back up the style thanks to that supercharger. Really, this is sort of like a budget-priced, more practical SVT Lightning, and the Harley Stuff adds to the sheer absurdity of a pickup truck with a big, rumbly V8 and a blower. I was surprised how enjoyable I found this truck, even though it's pretty objectively ridiculous.